We're approaching the midway point of the NFL season as league-wide trends continue to form. Among them is an increasingly chaotic NFC West that sees all four teams with 4 losses. This is partially fueled by the Seahawks, who were boat raced by the Bills on Sunday. ESPN's Mina Kimes joins us to break it all down and preview the huge divisional game between the Seahawks and the Rams. Let's light them up.
I'm Jacson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts.
Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jacson Bevins, and even though I am without my rapacious producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast. Man, another tough one. Things are feeling so good after the Seahawks had a 3-score win against the Falcons in Atlanta, got back to a winning record, got back in first place, felt like, okay, maybe they were through the turbulence, and then they went out there and just pooped all over themselves on Sunday against the Bills at home. Kind of a comedy of errors, and a game that felt like they had a real chance to win, even with their mistakes early, getting close to scoring a couple of first half touchdowns that I think would have changed the entire complexion of the game. But they had high profile mistakes inside the 5-yard line, and then it just avalanched from there. The mistakes compounded. The Bills stayed on schedule, did what they did, had a very, very comfortable victory that frankly was tough to watch as a Seahawks fan. Fortunately, our friend Mina Kimes is here to work through it with us, but before she does, Cigar Thoughts is proud to be sponsored by Seattle Cigar Concierge and Glenfiddich Single Malt Scotch Whiskey, 2 companies whose products I enjoy on a regular basis. Many of you already know this, but for those who don't, we've teamed back up with Seattle Cigar Concierge for an exciting second release of the Cigar Thoughts cigars for our patented Red Zone series, which combines a robust taste profile with a smooth Connecticut wrapper and will be available to purchase using the link on the show page for the same discounted price of $149 for a bundle of 10 stogies that you're used to with the Cigar Thoughts originals. The goal with these releases is to provide an avenue to high-end cigars without the high-end cost, and this partnership provides exactly that. The feedback on these stogies has been excellent so far, and we'd love yours as well. They also make a great gift, so get some for yourself or for someone else by following the link at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Mike and I love doing this show, and there are 2 ways y'all listening and watching can help support it so we can keep the episodes coming. One is by purchasing the cigars, which again, come at an astonishing price for the quality. The other is by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts, where you can watch full episodes as well as the funny and insightful clips that Mike puts together. Give a thumbs up to the stuff you like and let us know what you think in the comments. And of course, you can listen to us everywhere you get your podcasts. You know, it's funny, the Seahawks are 500 and effectively tied for first place in their division, but it sure doesn't feel like it. And that's because Seattle has lost 4 of their last 5 games, including a flaccid effort against the Buffalo Bills at home on Sunday. With that in mind, we reached out to one of the sharpest, wittiest, and most respected analysts in the game to help sort it out. You know her from her incredible work at ESPN and as the host of the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny. She is the brilliant Mina Kimes. Mina, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here. Happy to talk about that effort, although I would not characterize it as flaccid. I would say it was much more like the Seahawks punched themselves in the groin over and over and over. A little bit different. Yeah. Self-defeating.
Yeah. Potential correlation there. Embarrassing nonetheless. And, you know, there was a lot that went wrong on Sunday. Absolutely. You don't lose by that much at home unless that's the case. But we've had a few days to get clear of it, look back, gain a little bit of perspective. As you do, take a look back at Sunday's game. What stands out to you most about Buffalo's decisive win in Seattle?
It's something that you've seen a lot this season, so it's not unusual. But I think the Bills, particularly their offense, they're so good at running the football, sort of exacerbated it's almost symmetrical because the Seahawks can't stop the run and because they can't run the ball. They're unable to access consistently the things they do well. The drop back passing game, the fact that they have great weapons and a good drop back quarterback, or the pass rush, the pass defense, right? Because they're on offense, they're in 3rd and long too often. And then in defense, they're not in 3rd and long enough. So it's really like they're just not good at like the fundamentals of football right now, even though there are good players and things they do well.
Yeah. And I feel like to win high-level football games, I mean, every game in the NFL requires high-level football to win, but if you're going to beat good teams, you're not afforded that many lapses. Like, you can have bad plays, you can have bounces go against you, you can have some of that, but you can't have this much, especially when you're going against teams that, whose strength, in this case running the football, is diametrically opposed to the strengths of your defense. It allows them to relentlessly target the worst part of your game. And, it's interesting because Seattle has taken a fair amount of heat for being very pass happy on offense themselves. And it runs contrary to everything we heard from Mike Macdonald and Ryan Grubb leading into the season. They're not unique in this, saying that they want to run the football and be tough and hard-nosed and all that stuff. Every NFL coach wants that. But when you can't do it and when you can't stop it, it feels like one of the best ways to play defense is to be super aggressive on offense, is to score as often and as early as possible, like they did against Atlanta. Atlanta ran the ball for like 150 yards in the first half against them last week. But because the Seahawks kept scoring touchdowns on every drive, eventually there was one big explosive play on defense, and Atlanta had to go away from the run completely. They ran for like 30 yards in the second half, and that's the game script Seattle got, and they were able to lean on them. Do you feel like part of the reason they're passing so much isn't necessarily philosophical? It's this is the only way we feel we can win right now.
Yeah, it's 100% why. I mean, I think about, it wasn't, what was the game before the Falcons game?
That one to the 49ers.
The Niners. I think, the Niners, yes, it was the Niners game.
Yeah.
I think at McDonald, before that game, if I remember correctly, was like, yeah, we got to run the ball more. So they come out, and it's like, boom, 1 yard, boom, -2 yards, boom. So, and I think that's why this is very difficult, but they're not stupid. They understand the problems the lack of run pass balance is creating for this offense, but then they haven't figured out a way to improve this run game. And that's where, it gets a little bit interesting and tricky because, look, this offensive line is not good. We know that. And yeah, there have been games where they have run the ball better. And I think what they have to figure out is there anything conceptually that they need to be doing differently, perhaps to help the offensive line? Or is it just that they were running the ball better because defenses were, having to play the pass more and they were running into light boxes? Or Kenneth Walker was creating more, which I think was happening. There was games in the second halves where he was just kind of like doing stuff on his own and, popped off a few explosives because he's a little bit of a boom or bust back. That's just kind of his nature.
just a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. So I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you. Like I trade for a guard, right? Like I just...
Who's trading a good guard?
I know, right? It's amazing to me that the Vikings were able to trade for an decent offensive tackle. It's like,
totally.
God, that never happens. But yeah, they're in a really, really tricky spot right now. And I don't blame it on coaching, to be honest. I blame it far more on the front office and the construction of the team.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that. I want to circle back to a couple of specific things in the game. But since you mentioned it, I do think this is the bigger picture here. This was a big week for Mike Macdonald quotes. He had the sunk cost. Did you see his sunk cost quote?
No.
For those who are listening and haven't heard, he said, this is when he was on Seattle Sports 710 this week. He said, I think you got to start making some decisions on where to narrow it down. You can't focus on everything. So taking out the stuff that we feel like is kind of sunk cost at this point. Maybe trying to trim that and then really focusing on honing in on the stuff that we want to go excel at. That's stuff that I feel like there may be opportunities that we haven't been able to take advantage of at this point. Is that a call out of specific players, do you think? Or is that him just saying, look, we can't run, so we got to be excellent at the pass. And we can't stop the run, so we got to be excellent at stopping the pass?
I don't know. It might be the latter a little bit. But because there aren't... It's kind of like a Rorschach you could really read in a lot to that quote,
totally.
Right? I don't feel like it's players because I don't feel like there are obvious issues offensively, if that's what we're focused on. Maybe he's looking at the defense and thinking there are certain positions where they're going to have competition. I know cornerback opposite Tariq Woolen is one. But offensively, like, it's not like, you know, there's some incredible interior offensive line depth waiting in the wings on this team. So I'm not really sure what that would be. If it is about scheme, I mean, again, like, watching them against the Bills, and I actually thought I didn't catch all of the audio in the game because I practiced self-care and switched over at halftime to a different, kept the game on, but watched audio in a different game. But I thought Tom Brady actually did a good job. Tom Brady talking about sort of the lack of cohesion between the run and the pass game, right? And how much easier, like, he at one point he was like, dude, Geno's just in the gun and they're teeing off on him. And he's right?
Yep.
But is it like, would it be a magical elixir if they started trying to run the ball under center and running under center play action? I don't think so. So I don't think there are obvious solutions when you're facing this kind of talent discrepancy in the interior of the offensive line.
Yeah. You know, when you're getting beat up the middle, which Seattle has been pretty relentlessly so far this season, it does make it tough to get under center, and it does make it tough to turn your back to a defense and fake a handoff and then start your reads 2 seconds after you've snapped the ball. That's the part of play action that I think gets lost so often when we talk about doing it more. Well, you do need either the deception or the protection to work really well, because in shotgun, Geno can start his reads the second players start moving, and you can't do that on play action unless you're doing it out of the gun where you're looking forward the whole time, which Seattle has tried to do a little bit of. It feels like, and McDonald mentioned this too, how they just simply can't get to their entire playbook on either offense or defense right now because there's certain basics that they're not taking care of.
And that's a problem this week because this Rams defense cannot defend play action. We talked about this a little bit on my show when we previewed the game with Ben Solak. They're 32nd in EPA per play versus play action this year. 32nd. This Rams linebacker group is, first of all, it's an Ernest Jones revenge game, which we could talk about, but the linebacker group is not good, and they asked them to cover, and they're not good at it. So there should be an opportunity here, but as you kind of address, the Seahawks have had a lot of trouble accessing play action this year because it is a lot simpler to say, hey, we got a quarterback who's smart, who is accurate, who throws the ball quickly. Let's just ask him to sit back and read it out because we have no faith in, you know, everything else working together.
Well, and you've got receivers who win on their routes.
That as well, yeah.
And that helps, you know. I had the opportunity to go on Dan Vienz's show earlier today, and we were talking about this. And one of the themes that really came up was, you know, we were talking about how many people, you know, Seahawks fans who are usually eminently rational were calling for McDonald's job and overrated and, you know, bring Pete back and all of these things. Then look, that you lose 4 out of 5. This is the NFL. There's going to be some of that. But you know me, I'm huge on taking a big picture stance, especially when it comes to things like head coach, general manager, quarterback, right? If you got a linebacker who stinks through 6 games, okay, let's find a replacement. But in terms of the whole franchise type stuff, I think patience is warranted. And again, this is a 4-4 football team. It's not like they're 2-6 or 1-7. That being said, you know, there is so much discontinuity between last year and this year, not just with so many of the players, but they're all learning new languages on both sides of the ball. And you have coaches who haven't coached together before. And that takes some time to learn. I mean, this is a coaching staff that came together very late in the offseason. And so there is a lot of learning that's going on right now. And I think we're going to see some development. At least that's what we're all hoping for. But it is disappointing to see how little cohesion there is. The one area of this team that has tons of continuity from last year is the passing game. You've got the same quarterback, the same 3 receivers, the same tight end, the same 2 running backs that you had last year. There is a comfort level there that when I read that quote from Mike Macdonald and he talks about maybe we just need to hone in on the things we do excel at more. It feels like that's what he's talking about, which only makes them more one-dimensional.
I know. And that's where I just firmly turned my eye to John Schneider. Jacson, when was the last time the Seahawks had a good offensive line?
I know. 2014.
Yeah. What?
I know.
And it's not that they haven't invested in it. It's not that they haven't drafted players. It's not that they haven't signed players.
I know.
They've let guys walk. I mean, it's when you don't have functional offensive line play, you cut your playbook in half.
Yes.
It completely compromises what you can do, especially in a league where run pass conflict is so important. And, the best offenses in football right now are the ones that can run the ball. You don't have to be an amazing run game. You just have to be efficient. And they're so inefficient running the football.
The defense just has to respect it. It can't be counting on Ken Walker to be Superman twice a game and steal a couple of touchdowns or a couple of 25-yard runs. It has to be something that the defense respects. You don't need to get them selling out with 8 and 9-man boxes. You just need them to respect the fact that if they don't do their job, the runner's getting to the second level. And there's not really a whole lot of reason to believe that. If I'm a linebacker on the other side, not only do I know there's a 72% chance they're going to pass the ball on this play statistically, I'm not really that worried if they don't. So I'm going to take my first step and my first lean towards pass coverage until you give me a reason not to. And I'm not going to bring my safeties up in the box because you're not giving me a reason to. So I'm going to keep shading that guy over DK, or I'm going to bracket JSN if DK is not on the field. And we saw that, and they just put the clamps on everything. There's one other quote that I wanted to share with you from McDonald, the same interview. He said, maybe less is more at this point. So it's frustrating, you have things that can help schematically, but the answer at the end of the day is not the X's and O's. It's really not. That to me sounds like he's saying these guys can't get it done.
Yeah. And he's right. I don't know what people expect. I really, truly, we were talking about the Eagles, and did you see that the Jalen Hurts bomb to Devontae Smith? That people was going around what a throw, what a catch. It's an amazing catch, by the way. This is a very good throw. But when was the last time you saw Geno Smith in the pocket like that? With that much time and that much grass around him? I cannot remember. I can't. I'm tired of it. I'm tired. I'm
it's asking so much of your best players. This is the NFL. You need your best players to go out and win for you. But there's got to be an easy button available to you on offense. There's got to be some things that you can just say, okay, at least we know we can do this. Even their long completions haven't been with Geno standing and surveying. It's either him extending the play or throwing it high very early in the play because they were able to get a safety on a double move. It really, everything has to happen in such a hurried way for the Seahawks to have success. And yet they're still been very good on offense, Sunday notwithstanding.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have DVOA in front of me, but I'm sure that the passing attack is still probably top 13 or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, it's miraculous. I guess since this sounds all very depressed, I mean, I hope that the return of Abe Lucas at some point soonish, it sounds like, it makes a difference. Last I saw, they were saying, they've been kind of slow playing it all year, but he's practicing, right? Mm-hmm. His photo is suddenly appearing on the website. We'll see if he's emboldened by the recent election results when he comes back.
Right.
So, wow. Other than that,
emboldened or pissed off, either way, whatever motivates you, man. Let's get you back here. All right. I do want to zoom back in on the game and talk about 2 other things. Look, this is I think only the second, maybe third game of since he's been drafted that the Seahawks didn't have DK Metcalf. I'm not sitting here and saying that they win this game with him, but did it feel as obvious to you that he wasn't on the field as it looked?
Yeah, man. It also definitely changes the way defenses play this team. I mean, we already talked about how defenses don't really expect the run, but when DK's not on the field, it certainly makes everything easier in coverage. And you see the real trickle-down effect, right? Like, I think we think of the Seahawks wide receiver group as being really strong, but it is very obvious that defenses treat DK Metcalf as the number one, and there's a trickle-down effect where every other receiver benefits from that in terms of the matchups that they draw and the coverages that they face, the amount of space they're given to work with underneath. And I thought that it was very, very obvious in this last game. And, DK Metcalf is not a perfect player. He is...
No.
It can be frustrating at times, but he is so clearly the number one wide receiver on this team and a true, legit number one receiver that defenses respect.
Totally. My whole thing with DK is like with a lot of great receivers, the hot is worth the crazy. And it's just like you're gonna deal with some of that stuff. But John Fraley, who's an excellent follow, especially for Seahawks fans, but football fans in general on Twitter, was posting screenshots of where safeties were lined up in all the other games this year, and then how Buffalo is lining up their safeties. And it's a word I've used to describe Metcalf's impact before, but the gravity is so obvious. It's not just that the safeties are deeper, it's that the safety closest to DK is shaded. They are covering him with 1.5 guys on almost every single pass play. And there's no reason not to do that when he's not on the field, especially when you know your pass rush is going to get home and you know that they're not going to be able to run the ball effectively.
And it's huge in this Rams game. Their best cornerback is Darius Williams. DK Metcalf is probably 4 inches taller than him off the top of my head, at least. You have... listen, Williams being back in the lineup has made a big difference, and he's really helped a Rams secondary that was looking like one of the worst in the NFL earlier in the season. But that's a mismatch, right? Like you take that 10 out of 10 times, and so I think it's huge that they're getting him back in this one, especially because part of the reason why it feels like there's so many contested catches with Metcalf and it can be frustrating at times is because the ball has to come out so fast.
That's right.
Massive to have him back.
Yeah, I think so. We can't close the book on that game without talking about the Connor Williams experience. Connor Williams, who I think has been a net positive for this team, especially the last few games, as he got his feet underneath him. And look, the 2 plays do not define him as a player. Either one of them happens, it's like, okay, it's a wet game. You see bad snaps sometimes.
That was insane, dude.
You texted me and Danny during the game after the fumbled snap. He goes, I think he said something like, he snapped that ball into space.
Yeah.
It went straight up in the air.
I swear to God, Gino's own team sabotages him more than any other team in the NFL. The trip is because trips happen. It sucks. That snap was crazy. I will say I don't think I've noticed many bad snaps from him this year, so I'll write that one off to the weather and the weirdness. And he has that. It was a good acquisition. He has definitely been the best player. Granted, that's like being all the analogies I think of are offensive. Yeah. He benefits from the bar being low on the interior of that offensive line. He is good. It was a good pickup, clearly, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was. I mean, he single-handedly took 14 points off the board at least.
If they, look, no guarantee they score those touchdowns, but you're on the 1 yard line. It's not unreasonable to assume that they at least get one. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean the Seahawks win that game, but it's a different game the rest of the way. If Seattle comes away with 10 or 14 points in those possessions as opposed to 3, it's a different game script. It allows you to do different things. You're not spending the rest of the game playing out of a hole, but also these guys are professional athletes and mistakes happen and crippling mistakes sometimes happen. You can't go in the tank. And it really felt like the Seahawks did after that. You had Gino getting a personal foul penalty. He was rightly hot about getting hit late on a play and it didn't get called. Can't toss the ball at the dude that hit you. You got Derek Hall and Jaron Reed punching each other on the field
Yes.
and then going at each other's throats on the sidelines. Yeah. How much of that matters to you?
I mean, it matters, right? It's obviously, I earlier at the beginning, I said that the game was like they were punching themselves in the groin. That was sort of a big part of why, not just the follies at the goal line, but also some of the self-inflicted wounds. And it was, Gino, Gino has been such a great leader with this team. And DK too, by the way, like for all of the criticism DK gets sometimes for jawing and frustration on the field or whatever, the dude has been like an absolute model citizen off the field and takes accountability every time and is by all accounts like the best teammate in the world. So took the blame for the interception immediately. That was his fault, that kind of thing. Both these guys are studs. Yep. But yeah, it's a bad look. But I'm not like writing that to coaching immediately or overreacting to it, because it's not like a consistent issue with this team. This isn't a team that has like ongoing discipline problems or unusual penalty issues, right? So like, I don't know. It was a bad day for everybody and one, kind of a burn the tape kind of day. Yeah,
I think so. I think it's one of those things that's a big deal when you're losing, because like that shit happened every other week during the LOB era. You had guys fighting and grabbing each other's face masks and screaming at each other on the sidelines all the time. These guys are mega alpha uber athletes, testosterone coming out of their ears. They're in a massively emotionally charged environment with millions of people judging the work that they do on every single snap. And yeah, I mean, what's Derek Hall, like 23 years old? It's like I think Mike McDonald said it best. Actually, I thought this was a total bar. When he was asked about the fight, he's like, I like to see that. Like, I'm okay with that. I'd much rather tell my guys whoa than tell them go. And I was like, yeah, I'm on board with that. They win that game.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great line. And look, Seattle wins that game, or if this made them 3-2 over their last 5 instead of 1-4, then maybe it doesn't feel like as big of a deal. My question to you regarding this team, we see it's very easy, I think, for fans to lose sight of just how long an NFL season is and how much teams evolve over the course of a season.
Yeah.
Does it feel like we know who this team is? Or to put it another way, how likely do you think it is that at the end of the season, we look back at this halfway point and say, look how much they've changed?
It's a good question. I think it's more likely that the defense is better at the end of the year than the offense, because I think this offensive line is what it is. And I think that there's going to be games where it's not a problem because the passing attack is so good and Gino and these group of receivers are so good. And then there's going to be games like Buffalo where it's, there's been a few games this year, honestly, where the inability to run the ball and the inability to protect Gino against really good pass rushes is just going to be a problem. And I don't see that getting better necessarily. Like when we were talking about how do you make it's not, you can't just press a button that's like, no, running under center will help, or no, if we, use this personnel grouping, suddenly everything will be cured. Defensively, I think a lot of that when I watch is about communication, the structure of the defense, players trying to learn the system, figure things out, and also the coaches figuring out how to best use the players they have. A lot of new players on that side of the ball, right? Including linebacker joined the team this week. Secondary, You've got new players, new safeties, new linebackers, new defensive tackles. You don't have your best edge. So it's just, you probably notice he's not the best edge rusher anymore. But point is, there's so much change on that. And I go back to, Mike McDonald's Ravens defense that was really quite a mess early on and then figured things out. Acquired, obviously, Roquan Smith was a big part of that. But a lot of it was, it's complicated defense, players kind of learning their roles and how to communicate with each other. So I wouldn't be surprised if this defense looks a lot better at the end of the year than it does now.
Yeah. And we want, it's especially when you have such a seismic shift in culture, right? It's not like they're going from Jim Mora Jr. to Mike McDonald. They're going from Pete Carroll. And Pete Carroll, yes, it may have gotten stale. It feels like it got stale, but you had a comfort level with a guy who had been a head coach. And I don't know, let's just lack of a better word, failed out of the NFL and then rebuilt a whole new philosophy and then spent 14 years setting his feet in that philosophy and seeing success with it. It's a little bit easier, I think, to navigate a bad stretch of football when you have that behind you. Mike Macdonald doesn't yet. He's learning in real time how to deal with these things, how to deal with the 3-game losing streak, how to deal with a stadium full of disgruntled fans and all of that kind of thing. So I think it's fair to extend the leash a little bit. I'm not saying don't be frustrated as a Seahawks fan, don't be upset, but also remember why you watch sports in the first place. It's because, at least in theory, it brings you joy. And I would just say, don't rob yourself of potential joy being super frustrated 2 months into a new regime, but it does have to get better at some point. And to your point, it took the Ravens a while. And when he was at Michigan and their defense coordinator, it took him 2 years to take them from a bad defense to an excellent one. So this stuff does take time.
I think I would also say, like, from the fan perspective, bad run defense is more painful than bad pass defense.
Yes.
To me, you're right. Like, because if this was just a defense that was giving up explosive plays to great quarterbacks, I think fans would probably accept that a little bit more. But there's something about the consistently grinding out 5, 6, 7 yards and that feeling like they're never going to get off the field because they can't stop the run. It's hard for a team for a lot of ways, and it's really hard just to watch as like a viewer, right? So they got to figure that out somehow, whether it's through scheme or player acquisition or just player development, because I think that actually is, if I had to identify like what's the single biggest issue with this team, that would be it.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You get beat through the air and they score quick. Look, if you're going to break your finger, you'd rather just break it as opposed to it like slowly bending for 12 minutes until it snaps, right? Like, it's going to hurt, but let's get this thing over with. Let's bandage it up and keep moving. And if they can just shore that up enough so that the offense is able to stay in rhythm, I think the whole aspect of this team changes. And they've got an opportunity to do that against a susceptible Rams team who is getting healthy. We're going to talk about that in a sec, but I do want to step back just because I've got the opportunity to talk with you and you do such a great job covering the league at large. And like I always say, I'm a football fan first and a Seahawks fan second. This is a fascinating NFL season. They all are, but we've got 2 months worth of on-field data now. When you look at the league as a whole, with the admission that a lot can still change and will change, what developments so far have more or less met your expectations, and what have been the biggest surprises to you?
Ooh, man. Gosh, it's funny because I was just talking about this. Like, my preseason Super Bowl pick was Chiefs-Lions, so which is not. I'm not taking a victory lap. It was not exactly going out on a limb. But a lot of the best teams are not surprising. I think the biggest surprise have been the Commanders, frankly. Mm-hmm. Not just Jay Daniels, but the entire team, the offensive line, the defense is playing decent now. So that's been tremendous surprise. And probably the biggest one in the entire NFL, frankly.
Yes.
The Vikings, although they've just run into so many injuries there, I'm not sure how sustainable that is. Losing their left tackle is brutal. But that's been kind of the other one. The Broncos defense is the other big unit that's like really puts, I mean, the week 1 win does look a little bit more impressive, by the way. When you think about, this Broncos team and what they're becoming. So all of that is certainly factoring into it. I feel like otherwise it's mostly been the teams we've expected to be good have been good, right? Like I'm starting to look at power rankings and it's like, oh, right. The Lions, the Chiefs, the Niners, the Ravens, the whole NFC North, everyone thought would be great.
Yep.
The Ravens. So I would say those have been the biggest surprises thus far.
When you had me on your show, we talked about the NFC West.
That's right. Yeah.
The Niners surprise you being 4-4?
I mean, just the injuries. I think, Jacson, like, if I could go back last year, I think I would have pushed harder for Christian McCaffrey as MVP. Yeah. That's my take on the Niners. Dude, like, that guy, his impact on the offense, you're now seeing, because it's still a really good team. Obviously, they crushed Seattle. But they've had so many injuries on both sides of the ball. And even with McCaffrey back, I still would put the Lions ahead of them, to be honest. But I do feel like I don't feel like their Super Bowl window is closing, but they're just losing too many players now. Not just to injuries, but like as years, they're going to pay Purdy next year. They're going to do it, right?
Yep.
And I kind of feel like last year's Niners team was probably the best Niners team we'll see for a while. Still beating the pants off the Seahawks. So
yeah, that gap still exists. and your point about McCaffrey, it's my belief that the Brock Purdy win-loss stats, which I believe Brock Purdy is a good quarterback. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I think he's been especially impressive in a couple of games this year without Ayuk and Debo and McCaffrey and all that. That win-loss record he had in those first 2 years exactly correlated with the Christian McCaffrey acquisition. He took over as starter the same time they brought McCaffrey in, and that offense transformed. Now, I'm not the type to penalize good players for playing with other good players, but to your point about the value, the most, MVP goes to best season by a quarterback, but we want to talk actual value. The correlation in wins for the 49ers over the last 3 seasons has lined up with the availability of Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams. When those two guys are both on the field, they are a Death Star. When they're not, they are a pretty beatable team.
Yeah, they're definitely beatable, which is why it's such a shame that Seattle wasn't more competitive against them without McCaffrey.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't a blowout, obviously, but like it just. But the thing about the Niners, this version of the Niners is, and this was obviously what you saw with Seattle, with McCaffrey, they're almost impossible to defend. Frankly, it's really, really hard because of the multiplicity and the ability. You want to play man coverage, but he can beat anyone you want on him in man coverage, etc. Without him, they have a very traditional, very good running game. Mm-hmm. It's a good running game. Jordan Mason's great. Debo's great. And Seattle can't even stop that. That's not even because some teams can't, but like they don't need Christian McCaffrey to beat the Seahawks defense right now with, frankly, some ease. And I think that's the problem with the Seahawks. Yeah,
I agree. And elsewhere in the division, I mean, you and I, we didn't really know what to make of the Rams coming in the season. And I'm not sure that we still do. But we thought the Cardinals would be feisty.
Yeah.
They are better than I thought because they're not winning these games with Kyler and Marvin Harrison going crazy. It's James Conner and a defense with no names on it playing much better football than I anticipated.
The defense is playing good. I still think Seattle has the matchup advantage on that side of the ball, but
I agree.
I don't believe Seattle has a matchup advantage on the other side of the ball. So, like, I feel like every Seahawks game is like, can they score enough? But yeah, they're good. It's interesting because I've watched the Cardinals pretty closely this year because I find them so interesting. And like the offense, like the one you saw last week against Miami, like that's what it should be when it's at its best.
Yep.
Felt like they finally figured out a way to use Marvin Harrison the way I was hoping, but they've been inconsistent. There's been times where the passing game has not looked anywhere close to what we saw this past Sunday. So the thing about the NFC West, man, like all the teams are pretty damn even this year. Yeah. I mean, the Rams who were playing, the offense is an absolute Death Star when everyone's healthy, and unfortunately that is happening. But the defense is still gettable, so it doesn't feel like last year or the years prior where it was like a kind of the Niners and the Rams and then the Seahawks and the Cardinals.
Right. Well, and I mean, it's reflected in the record. And look, records after 8 games, standings after 8 games, oftentimes do not correlate with standings after 17 games. But like I mentioned in the intro, all 4 teams have 4 losses. And I can't remember the last time any division was in that situation this late into the season. Right. So, the Cardinals, who I think most people, certainly I assumed would be the worst team in this division, blew out the Rams and beat the 49ers. Like these teams can beat each other. A couple other things that have stood out to me about this NFL season. One has been the midseason trades. I feel like teams are getting more comfortable with moving like really key pieces before the trade deadline. And we've seen so much of that with wide receivers right now. I know they moved the trade deadline back a few years ago because it used to be really early in the season. It was like week 5 or something crazy. But it still took a few years for teams to like actually kind of lean into that. Now it seems a little bit more like basketball, baseball.
Totally.
Do you think coaches are just more and GMs are more comfortable saying, you know what, we can integrate this guy? An Amari Cooper, a DeAndre Hopkins, a Deontay Johnson.
I think they've seen so many of them work in recent years. There's been a lot of really impactful midseason trades, and maybe it has something to do with the longer season a little bit too, right? Like you're talking about like this kind of belief that they can integrate these players. GMs probably being a little bit younger, more analytically minded, less traditional maybe factors into it as well. But I absolutely love it. And, you know, it's been a lot of receivers as of this taping. I'm curious to see if any defensive linemen start moving, right? The Lions being the obvious acquire. The Cardinals, they're a team I would look to see if they might acquire on defense. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like because the Seahawks have already made the move for Jones, which I liked. I want to say, but the problem is I don't know if their needs are out. Like the primary need is the offensive line, and I don't know if there's any players who are going to be available. Yeah.
I mean, everybody wants what Seattle wants. And if you have it, you're not going to let it go cheap, even though Cam Robinson just went to the Vikings for like a late round pick swap. So I don't know. We can be mad at the Seahawks for not pulling that one off, but at the same time, there were 30 other teams that didn't do that either. The last thing before we talk about the Rams game that I do really want to get your thoughts on, because it's really developed over the last 24 hours. And I think it's a microcosm for a larger quarterback conversation, is what's going on with Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis. He was benched after this last week. And my initial thought was like, yeah, we're going to show him that like, this is a spot you have to earn. And I was thinking it was going to be kind of a short term. We'll throw Flacco out there against Brian Flores this week and then reevaluate. But then Shane Steichen came out today and said, essentially, Joe Flacco's the guy moving forward. Where do you come down on this?
Well, this is a one where it's hard to evaluate without knowing exactly, one, what are the actual reasons that led to this? Because the way it's been handled, and certainly the language coming out of the Colts today, suggests to me that it's not just about what we're seeing on the field. And I'm not saying that, there's anything nefarious going on. Like, there's no reports coming out of Anthony Richardson, but perhaps there's the view that, like, hey, he is not quite ready for this in terms of his preparation, what we're seeing in practice, etc., study, all of that. I don't know. But I'm saying that it feels like there's more to it in that regard. As far as like how they're managing the play, like I do not see the benefit of sticking with Flacco through the end of the season personally. There is a cap on this team in my view, and it feels like your best case scenario is one where maybe you sneak into the playoffs, similar to what the Browns did, get eliminated in the wild card round. And don't get me wrong, there are benefits to being competitive. Some of it is being able to evaluate your whole team, not losing the locker room, all of that. But
yeah, the team has to feel like you're trying to win.
Sure. But I don't see how it makes you better in the long term.
Yeah.
And so I guess my feeling is like, it's fine if they feel like Richardson needs like a little bit of a reset, a breather. They need to fix some things. But if they're giving up on him, it feels way too soon. Yeah. And if they're planning on riding this out with Flacco, that feels like short-term thinking. You
took a quarterback at number 4 that you knew only started 13 games in college. And you came into the season knowing he had only played 4 games in the pros. And Shane Steichen said, the way for quarterbacks to learn is for them to play. And this seems to fly very contrary in the face of all of that. It feels to me like an overcorrection. Now, look, if Flacco goes out there and beats the Vikings and this team goes 9-8 and makes the playoffs, well, okay, maybe it's vindicated. I'm not a believer in losing on purpose. I think winning begets winning. However, you're right. Flacco, by the time this team ever gets ready to really compete for a Super Bowl, if and when they get there, Joe Flacco's not going to be the quarterback. And I think it just speaks to the perils of saying, oh, well, the good quarterback that we already have isn't the best quarterback in the world, so we need to lose a bunch of games and draft a new guy and get him in on a rookie contract.
Yeah.
And the exceptions are not proving the rule. Like, yes, we have seen a few guys come in and be excellent right away. But go back to, what was it, the 2021 draft class that was supposed to be the best one in, since 1983. And you had Trevor Lawrence, can't miss. Well, yeah. And then you got Zach Wilson and Justin Fields and Mac Jones. And there's one other quarterback in that draft class. And this speaks to, I can't even remember who it is. Anyway, none of them have even come close to living up to their billing. The hit rate is small, even in the top 10 on these quarterbacks.
Yeah. I mean, Richardson, Bryce, same year.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll get CJ Stroud, and then next year doesn't look great. The class doesn't look great. This year looks good though. So I guess I don't like people to say it's never worth it and, oh, the development curve is all wrong. Well, look at the top 3 this year. I think have all really shown something. Williams, Daniels, May, even Nick's playing all right now. Obviously, Penix hasn't played. So I don't think it's like an automatic, hard, line in the sand. But yeah, it's definitely not a foregone conclusion. He might become Geno Smith, right? Is the thing that they're praying for, but the odds are probably not.
Yeah, I just feel like if you're a team that's kind of in the middle and bringing it back to the Seahawks, you have a team that's still fairly young and certainly new when it comes to what they're trying to do over the next few years. The issue with this team is not their quarterback play.
No, that is
so low on the
Yeah, right. If you want to go back to our conversation at the top, and if that's not obvious, I'm not saying he's perfect, right?
No, certainly not. But
yeah, it is very low on the list of problems with this football team. That is for sure.
Totally. And I mean, I know this harkens back to something you believe in strongly. I believe it's still in your Twitter bio in terms of wins being a quarterback's stat. Like, all right, Joe Burrow's 3-5, right? I mean, great, yeah. He's playing good ball. If you're the Bengals, you're not looking at this team and being like, well, shoot, we're not going to win the Super Bowl this year. We should probably save some money at the quarterback position. So, yeah, I just think that the Richardson thing, we've seen it so much with young quarterbacks that if you don't hit right away, then you really set the franchise back, and there's a massive draft capital opportunity loss by doing it. I'm not saying never draft a quarterback early, but I don't think it's something that you force. I mean, you even look at the 49ers, who had a good team, a team ready to enter a championship window. They mortgaged the future for a quarterback that didn't work out. Now, they've had enough talent, and Brock Purdy has bailed them out later in that same draft, but that was not good process either.
Yeah, I think how much scarier they would be if they had those draft picks.
That's what I'm saying. All right. So last thing I want to chat about with you before we get out of here is this game coming up against the Rams. It's a huge one. It's the first of 3 straight divisional matchups for the Seahawks. You've got a team that you mentioned is getting healthier. They looked bad. This looked like a lost season for the Rams. They were 2-4 going up against a 5-1 Vikings team, but then Kupp is back, and then surprise, surprise, here comes Puka Nacua, has a monster game. Stafford looks MVP quality. Kyron Williams still doing his thing, and it put the defense in a position to really attack. Now, vibes change from week to week, but they're not meaningless at all. Look no further than Seahawks vibes over the last 3 weeks, coming out of a 49ers loss into a Falcons win into the Bills loss. But the Rams have to be feeling pretty good right now.
Yeah. I'll keep this brief because I'm running out of time, part because I feel like this one's pretty simple. I don't think the Seahawks defense can stop the Rams offense. I'd love to be wrong, but now that they're fully healthy, they look like a goddamn Death Star. Yep. So for me, it really comes down to the other side of the ball, which, look, entirely possible. I don't think this Rams defense is good. I do not, right? Jared Verse feasted on whoever came in for Christian Darrisaw. He's good, but I really believe They can move the ball on this Rams team. Their pass catchers are better than the Rams DBs. It really all comes down to whether or not they can buy Geno Smith enough time. Can they get the play action pass activated? Like we said, the Rams defense sucks against play action.
Yep.
Can they? One thing I would love to see is a little bit of Geno on the move, whether that's by design or playmaking. The mission this week is they have to figure out, can we just buy enough time for Geno Smith to take on these Rams DBs? Because if they can, I think this thing can actually be competitive.
Can the Seahawks win this game without DK Metcalf?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
He's playing, right?
They're optimistic. He's not practicing yet, but they are, quote, optimistic that he's gonna play this week. Yeah, it seems like there's some obvious matchups that the Seahawks are gonna lose in this game. I think it's the run offense on both sides. They just have to get explosive plays, and they got to turn the ball over. That's what we saw against the Falcons that has been missing this year, even when the defense has played pretty well, is turning the ball over and flipping the field and giving your team a short field. Seattle has not had a lot of short fields to work with in this game. And the Rams are going to score. I mean, I think Seattle needs to have at least 5 scoring possessions in this game. And I think at least 3 of those have to be touchdowns if they're going to have a chance, because you're not winning this game 19-17.
No, I totally agree. I'm not without hope. I really believe they can move the ball on this defense. So, I think that the Mike Macdonald has been a great game manager too, by the way. The way he has approached timeout deployment, fourth downs, generally, I'm a big fan of the 2-point conversions and all of that. So I think he understands what he has to do. He seems very self-aware and realistic about this football team, which is something I appreciate and hasn't always been the case.
Yeah. And that is something that when we were talking about Mike Macdonald again, like I said, I was on Dan Vienza's show, Seahawks Forever, this morning. It's a great show. If you haven't checked it out, those of you listening, make sure you do. But I do think there are warranted criticisms of Mike Macdonald so far, but I don't think game management, sideline management is one of them. I think that he is, I'm not saying that you need to have the New York Times fourth down bot telling you exactly what to do on every play, but you should be aware of those numbers. And it feels like he understands the concept of win probability added when it comes to how to use the final 2 minutes of a half, when to call your timeouts, when to challenge, when to go for it on fourth down. That stuff feels more solid than it has in years.
I agree. The way he approached the Lions game in particular, I thought he made some really, really good game management decisions end of the half and whatnot. So I think he is going to do whatever it takes to actually, give this offense a fighting chance. It just comes down to whether or not they can do the things we talked about.
Yeah. And I hope they stay. I hope they stay aggressive, because I think it's the only way they win. I don't think trying to shorten the game works in Seattle's favor. Last question for you, Mina. How likely is it the Seahawks make the playoffs? You play out this season 10 times starting now. Simulate it 10 times. How many times they make the playoffs?
3 out of 10 at this point.
Yeah.
How's that feel to you?
Yeah.
NFC North is just too damn good.
I know. There's not going to be any wildcard spots available.
No, they got to win the division. Yeah. We'll see. I don't know. The Vikings, like I said, they're losing a lot of players, so that could help.
I'm not a believer that the Bears stick around. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Commanders come back to the pack. I was worried about the Bucks, but I
do think at this point we just root against the NFC West.
I think that's
Bears
the way.
Are playing the Cardinals. Go Bears.
And again, they're tied for first. It's not like they have to make up 3 games in the division. So if they can get this on track, I think they're going to be in good shape. Obviously, a win this week against the Rams goes a long ways towards that. Mina, thank you so much for your time. Know how busy you are. Means the world to me to have you come in. And love your work as an analyst. Very, very happy to have you as a friend, and very happy to have you as a guest on the show.
Thank you so much. Congratulations on first place in the Dynasty League at the midpoint of the season.
Hey, I wasn't going to bring it up.
I'm coming for you. I'm just saying, I'm coming for you.
Yeah, you had your shot this past week. You gave it a good go. You've had your time in the sun.
Jared Goff getting like 9 points in a 54-point win didn't help my cause. Jared Goff, who, by the way, let's end with this. You traded to me. One of the worst trades ever.
I did. And the revenge game didn't end up working out. Before we let you go, tell us what you got coming up on the Mina Kimes show featuring Lenny.
check it out wherever you get podcasts. We talk about every game every week. We usually give a fair amount of time to Seahawks games because they're interesting. You can download wherever you get your pods, or you can check it out at youtube.com/@Mina Kimes.
As always, you can find Mike and I on social media. I am on Twitter at Jacson Bevins. That's Jacson. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on Twitter at Mike Barwin, and the show itself is at Cigar Thoughts. You can find full video episodes on our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts. Find the rest of our socials at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. As mentioned previously, this episode is brought to you by Glenfiddich Premium Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Y'all know I'm a huge fan of their lineup, and we are thrilled to have them on board as a sponsor of the show. One of the great things about a great scotch is how well it pairs with a good cigar. So once again, we do have our own special release of cigars that you can purchase at a terrific price as a listener of the show. The release of these Cigar Thought Stogies has been successful enough for us to continue offering them for the low price of $149. That's right, just $149 for a bundle of 10. As many of you know, we partnered with one of the most prestigious cigar manufacturers in the world to release these official Cigar Thought cigars, which you can order directly from cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Just follow the link on the show page to get these easy-to-smoke stogies rolled with 13-year premium Dominican tobacco leaf, or hit us up on Twitter or Instagram and we'll send you the details directly. And the cigars, they come with a Bovita humidification pack and a Mylar storage bag to make sure they stay fresh whether you have a humidor or not. Of course, you can listen to this show and read every article at fieldgoals.com, and if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you like the show, drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of the show. We know you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it is an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing this show on social media and with your friends, you give us the juice to keep making this happen. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.